Very nice of you for having put the very big issue in a nutshell. Now, in this search of education, this book, I hope the readers will read. They will try to understand what you mean by social pedagogy, what you try to say by society driven education, and what this draft national education policy actually does to this society. So, why they should ask the government to withdraw the draft and come out with a fresh draft which will give equitable access to education. That is the demand that we are placing. We want equitable access to education, right from the school education up to the university level education. Now, the way that they are talking about the school complex, the way they are talking about 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, the way they are talking about a 4-year degree course because it is practiced in USA, the way they are talking about the liberal education in the draft policy, the way they are talking about doing away with the affiliating colleges issue. Hereafter, no university will affiliate colleges, no university. Do you think that India is ready for these kind of changes just by showing it is in America? It should also be in India. Will this argument really help us, or when they are trying to break the structure and bring in a new structure in that place? How do you see whether it is pulling us back? Is it turning the wheel back or moving forward?
It is not moving forward. There are two components you asked. The first question is why we should reject the policy and what is there, and the second is the liberal education, vocational education, and the restructuring of the education system, like 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4, or type 1, type 2, type 3 higher education system, and the regulatory authorities and governance structure they have come up with. All these things are there. But at the outset, I would like to say it is not moving forward. It is taking us 1,000 years back. Maybe it is taking us backward. And why it is going to be backward is that the education, the draft education policy has nothing to say except inculcating the interest of the vested people at the helm of the affair, on the society and at the government, the nation state. So I say this as a nationalistic education. So this is an antidote. This is a diametrically opposite concept of society-driven education that this book proposes. So that means the nationalistic education means it has to say Indian pride, Indian-centric, Indian knowledge, Indian tradition, all those things. But my question is, being an Indian, I don't mind going through all those things. I'm also Indian. I want to make my own, but that is also society-driven education. Society-driven education means it is relevant to society. That means relevant to India. So if it is Indian-centric, it is okay. But whose Indian-centric? Whose Indian ideals? And whose Indian culture? So
it is Rajalakshmi's or the perpetrator of Rajalakshmi?
Perpetrator of Rajalakshmi. So we need to know whose culture, whose ideals, and whose traditions that they want to inculcate in the name of liberal education into our system. So liberal education is the Rajalakshmi matter. You said that the girl was beheaded for just asking question.
And that too born in that community.
In that community. And liberal education asked the girl to ask questions. See, that is the concept of liberal education is fine because it enables the people, enables the learner to ask questions, to challenge questions, to challenge or confront the conflicting ideas and opinions and knowledge a learner encounters. So there is no problem with the concept.
Not just a livelihood and life skill.
Nothing. It's everything. So that means naturally liberal education enhances or enables one to question and challenge the knowledge that he or she encounters. So whereas the policy says, as a nation state, I will decide the curriculum. I will chair as a prime minister. And I will have the regulatory body. Even at the age of 3, the ECCE, early childhood care education, they say that it is not the state. It is the Ministry of Human Resource and Development will regulate it. And the National Curriculum Framework will set the curriculum, not the state.
For both student as well as for parent.
For the parents. So that means, what are they trying to say? Say liberal education is locally driven, people driven, society driven. And liberal education means, challenge the knowledge that a student encounters in classroom and outside the classroom. So whereas against the liberal education policy and philosophy, you are sitting there in Delhi, you are going to tell, this is the culture you should read, this is the art you should read, and you cannot question. We are here and we will devise the curriculum. This is the reason I reject it. We reject it. We have to reject. People have to fight for it. Because at the age of 3, if they intoxicate the mindset of the child, what does it know about it? The child, of course, the brain is more powerful at that time to receive the things. That is why they want to indoctrinate those things. But the child needs another 10 years for it to question and challenge things. At the age of 3, it will not. So that means, in the name of liberal education, on the premise of liberal education, the draft policy wants to inculcate and bring its ideals into it and create a citizenry that will reflect the ideals of the nationalist, the so-called nationalist or right-wing or whatever. These people try to inculcate these things. That is why we have to reject it. And on the structure you said, the affiliation you said, in the higher education, the affiliation system should be removed. There is no question about it. The affiliation system, because all countries have eliminated the affiliation system, because the affiliated college, for instance, out of 78% of the colleges in India, there are about more than 30% of colleges are one single program colleges, like B.Ed colleges. The B.Ed colleges alone, one single program. So they are trying to offer one program through a college where they are going to be teachers. Those who are studying B.Ed are going to be teachers also. How a teacher should be groomed, at what ambience, at what situation. So they have to have a universal environment and ambience in a university system, so that they will be able to acquire all relevant, all-round skills for them to improve.
I see the contradiction only here. When coming to the teacher education, you say a teacher should have a multidiscipline, and the teacher should have knowledge about the society, about the Constitution of India, what kind of equality that the Constitution is trying to do, and without knowing the Constitution, and especially without reading the address by Baba Sahib Ambedkar on 17 December 1946 and 25th November 1949 in the Constituent Assembly. Can there be a teacher in India? And without reading what submission Mahatma Jyotirao Phule had before the Hunter Commission, can there be a teacher in India? These are your concerns, I believe. That is, a teacher should be a liberal teacher, yes, in the sense that the teacher should know the society, and a subject knowledge that a teacher will possess must try to mix with these ideas and come out as a product, yeah, and which the student will critically engage, yeah, himself or herself, and they will come out with an answer. This is what you mean. Certainly. But the draft policy says type 2 is a teacher research education. Where is teacher education in the type 1? Where is the teacher education in type 2? Doing away with the B.Ed college, which is non-functional or which doesn't have adequate standard, which does not give a multidisciplinary approach, that is always welcome. But the type 1, type 2, type 3, what they are proposing is something very imaginary, yeah, where they give a time framework. By 2032, our arts and science college must at least convert itself into a type 3. Yeah. Otherwise, they should close down. Yes. If you want to become at least a type 3, you may become type 1, type 2, anything, at least a type 3, then your college should become a multidiscipline college. I am talking about arts and science college, where millions of students, after completing their higher secondary, they go. Yeah. And now, if before 2030, if they do not get converted, they want these colleges to be merged with the university. What will happen to the higher education system, especially the government colleges, if the government does not allot adequate fund in the very first financial year, that is 2020-21 itself? Can this college, within 10 years, get converted into a type 3, or if doesn't convert into type 3, if it merges, so more than 50% colleges will disappear, and that means the government colleges will be affected, whereas the private colleges will have a field day. In that kind of a scenario, what we have to do, or how do you think this policy has to be questioned?
This last portion I answer now, but the first portion about the teacher quality and preparing the teachers to be the best teachers, I will answer second. If I forget, you please remind me.
Sure.
So the first part is the structure, type 1, type 2, type 3. It is wrong propositions actually. The wrong it is because, as you said, that more than only 900 about plus universities are there as of now in India. So we have about 42,000 colleges in India. So that means majority of the colleges, whether single program, multi-program, these are the programs where majority of the students and villagers are going and studying, at least getting a degree and get some exposure. So if you bring this in a matter of 10 years, which is not at all possible, this is impeding educational service, higher education service to the students. That is one thing. The other thing is, type 1 is research intensive. Type 2 is teaching based university. That will also offer up to PhD program. And type 3 is autonomous colleges. So they want all colleges to be autonomous now. Say as of now, we have affiliated system. Autonomous means you have to devise your own curriculum. How many teachers know how to devise their own curriculum? So if it is Anna University, there are 600 colleges affiliated to. The teachers do not know what curriculum is about because it has been devised by Anna University. So far, since independence, the curriculum, syllabus, everything was has been fed by the Anna University. So that means the students, the faculty or professors do not have experience to create their own curriculum. Suddenly, all of a sudden, if you dissociate and they tell them that you be autonomous, what will they do without preparations, without enough time, without learning curve? This 10 years time is not enough, number one. And number two, this autonomous colleges, if they are not going to be autonomous, are not going to be upgrading themselves as universities, they will be merged with another university.
It's the university which gave them affiliation.
Yes, which gave them affiliation. And that is
closing down.
That is closing down. Either they have to close or dissipate or dissolve the existence of that college. So over a period, say Anna University is centered in Chennai. There are 600 colleges there in Tamil Nadu. So Anna University being in Chennai and having another campus in Thoothukudi or Madurai, how are they going to merge these institutions with Anna University? And how are they going to create that educational ambience, the university ambience to a private college that is existing somewhere 600 kilometers away? So this is practically not a problem. That is why in this book I suggested an alternate solution, that type 1 can be promoted. There is no problem with that. We need more research intensive universities. Those who qualify for type 1 universities can be promoted.
Bring in more universities.
More universities.
They can build. The government must come forward to invest more money in higher education.
Yes.
But this draft policy is only talking about financial autonomy of the higher education institutions, where they have to generate their own fund. You should have seen in the newspapers, the Madras University Senate and Syndicate, how they were talking about not getting adequate money, and the question about how they are going to pay the salary, pension, and how the courses are going to survive in the Madras University. So if there is no adequate funding from the government to a public institution, the question of public institutions will be in very big danger. So when the public institution gets weakened, and that place will be taken up by the private institutions. If the private institutions take, there is no regulation for fee, they say. They talk only about scholarship. And they very clearly violate the constitutional mandate of providing reservation even in a private college, non-minority private. But they say that private institutions, higher education institutions, need not follow reservation policy. There is not going to be government institutions. The government institutions are going to become less in number. and the private institutions will not talk about reservation. So how do you see the social justice angle in this entire?
Yeah, social justice is nothing there in the even in the current system or in the proposed new education policy. There is virtually no provision for social justice, and the reservation is made mockery, and it is not going to be implemented. There is no provision for implementing reservation as
in
well
the draft policy.
In the draft policy, and they never mentioned a word about it. And they mentioned that it should not be practiced by private education. That is what they mentioned. And my question is, private education means, is it a business entity where they can do whatever they like? They can fix their fees. They don't have to.
They have to just declare they are non-profit and non-charitable. Yeah. They have to just ensure the safety of the students. Yeah. With these two criteria, they can do anything. How much money they spend, they can collect as a fee, and there won't be any regulatory body at all. Do you feel that this is linked with WTO GATS?
Yeah, actually, WTO GATS was India offered its provisions to WTO GATS in the year 2005, and since then about 14 years passed now. By now they should have implemented the mandates of the WTO GATS, but they didn't do it because of the political compulsions here. People might agitate, so foreseeing all these people problems, they don't want it. But the main problem is GATS wanted more privatization. Even in the internationalization, provision in the national education policy, they want to open up the gates and bring more educational providers, universities to come down to India. Not only physically they invited, but also online and through digital mechanisms. They wanted to have foreign services, foreign educational services to be practiced in within India. So that means I foresee what in after 10 years or 20 years, if this is implemented, what will happen, that almost major educational services will be online, virtual education. And if we follow GATS now, most of the educational services in India in higher education will be done by the overseas people through online and digital things, where we have to as education as a trade, as a commodity laid out in WTO, and we have to pay. So it becomes a business. So what WTO says is, it asks the government to deregulate the educational services in India. So you don't regulate it. Let them charge as they like. And you provide a competitive mechanism. Like competitive economy, at the advent of globalization, they wanted to have a competitive educational services under the new education policy. So under this competitive environment, they want us to just levy the fees as we like and bring in everybody, whoever we want, and we can also go overseas and set up our shoppings. So already the private educational service providers and promoters in India are shopping around both in India and trying to shop around in overseas also, which at this moment they cannot do. But they have already saturated the platform here in India. It's going to be highly privatized in future. So considering this, the GATT is asking the government of India to disinvest or deregulate and no subsidies. So you shouldn't, because it is against the mandate of WTO, where government of India signed in 2005. So that means there shall be no subsidies. That is why they are asking now the higher education institutions, universities, the government universities, to raise the fees. You fix your own fees. So that means there is an attempt now in India to corporatize the government universities, so that government will be on their own. Government universities, they cannot depend on the government's public investment any longer. So even the government universities are going to be behaving like a private universities after 10 years.
So you see this draft National Education Policy 2019 as a roadmap for implementing WTO GATS.
That is it. They have been working for 14 years, since 2005. Because of political local situations and conditions, they were not able to do it. So through this education policy, they want to do it.
So now about the teacher education, what you wanted me to remind.
The teacher education, we discussed about the teacher education, how teachers to be prepared and groomed to become best teachers. And the policy is saying all those many other nonsense and very impractical approaches.
They feel an Anganwadi or a pre-primary or preparatory teacher, if he or she is trained for 4 years, they become good teachers. It is not that 2 years is a problem, 1 year is a problem.
That is also a partial thing. But they are expecting local heroes and volunteers. They quote as local heroes. Who are these local heroes? Instructional aides, national tutor programs, and there are so many ways, informal way they want to bring people inside to inculcate their social ideals. So that is the reason. So that is why the policy wants to touch radically, change the Right to Education Act passed into the Right to Education Act 2009. Say the main thing is they want to bring multiple pathways of learning as Gurukula, Pathshala and other religious mode of teachings. And they want to amend the Right to Education Act. And to bring the local heroes, the so-called local heroes, who are going to be fed by this neoliberal order and this, especially cultivated communities, and they are going to come and teach as teachers who are not qualified. And for that informal mechanism of bringing the people inside to teach, all suffraganized or whatever the ideal people they have at the nation state and the rulers, they are going to bring them down into the teaching in the classroom. So to amend the Right to Education Act is their first task to revamp the school education system. So and they want to scrap the input. They want to scrap the input of education establishment or educational service. The input means the qualified teacher to be there, and the land should be there, and space should be there, or built environment, and the pedagogy, curriculum, everything should be adopted. No external intrusions. These are all the input maintained. This is going to provide equality, equal access, affordability. That is the Right to Education Act. But the new policy wants to dilute and completely change it. They want to scrap the inputs, and they don't want this input. If these inputs are there, these so-called local heroes cannot come inside, and they cannot teach as they like, all their spiritual and other nonsense that they want to bring in. So that is the reason they want to dilute the Right to Education Act and bring the teachers and the so-called teachers who are not qualified. But on the teachers who are qualified teachers, I would like to comment that liberal education means liberative education, liberating the people from the mindset of the already they are clutched with, and from the limitations of the society. A society's limitation is posed on the students. So that means we have to liberate the students from there. So that means a critical pedagogy is required, and critical thinking must be there inculcated in the students. So in that way, the teachers should facilitate the critical pedagogy, the critical thought process, and bring the students from the clutches of the oppressive thought of learning process that they have been going through. For that, a teacher, more than the subject knowledge, should have the quality, the attitude, the commitment, the behavior. These are all more than the subject knowledge because a teacher is not going to just transfer all his mind to the students. He is going to simply facilitate it. Even if he is a half-baked teacher who is half-baked in his subject knowledge is enough. But the main thing is the teacher's behavior, the teacher's attitude is more important to enable the students to engage the students and interact with the students on equal footing, and liberate the students from the age-old thought process. So that means the policy talks about liberal education, but it doesn't talk about to prepare the teachers
for liberating
the students and providing the mechanism, ambience, environment to engage the students in the classroom properly.